So we come to Spider-Noir, and Nicolas Cage plays the titular Spider. The character's name is not Spider-Noir. And, you got to hand it to Nicolas Cage. I mean, the guy, I've called him the Lon Chaney Jr. of superheroes. He's played a version of Superman, albeit in the Flash movie, which was basically just computer generated. I think he claims that wasn't even him in that scene, even though he filmed the scene. He claims that wasn't him in the scene. I think he played Ghost Rider, which honestly I love the original movie Ghost Rider, and the second movie also was very good. The second movie wasn't as good, but I thought it had its good points. You know what I mean? It's sort of a darker and bleaker take on Johnny Blaze. I kind of preferred the first one, but again, he's done Marvel superheroes, he's done DC superheroes, and now he's attempting to do Spider-Man. And like I said, I really wasn't even thinking of watching the show, but I said to myself, you got the free trial, you've got Spider-Man dressed as Bullet Bourbon. What could go wrong? How could you not be interested in something like that? And boy, am I glad I did tune in, because this honestly was a very good show. And halfway through it, I was like so impressed. I was like, I really want to see more of this show. I think it's like 8 episodes or something. And I was like, gee, I wish this was like a full season. The problem is though, is I don't know if it quite sticks the landing, but we'll get there in a second. First of all, obviously, uh, Nicolas Cage plays Ben Riley, which, if you know the comics, again, I don't really know the character of Spider Noir, or I know that it was in the Across the Spider Verse or whatever when they had all the different Spider characters come together. I never saw the second movie, and that I guess is going to be a trilogy. Um, but I says it, looks like a compelling character. Let me check it out. So, you know, watching it's sort of a period piece where, again, that's something that's like right up my alley. I like that kind of 30s Dick Tracy, King Kong, that kind of era is just great. And I love seeing something set in that. So Ben Riley, of course, in the comics was sort of the clone of Peter Parker, and they did the whole clone saga in the 90s, which honestly everybody admits was terrible. I don't know anybody who really liked what they did in the 90s with that. And they created Ben Riley as the clone of Peter Parker from the 70s, and it's a very long and involved story, but that's where that name comes from. And basically what the show does is take names from the Spider-Man show or the Spider-Man books, at large, and then uses them for their own purposes. We have Cat Hardy, which I guess is their take on Felicia Hardy. Now, she has nothing to do with Black Cat, and they race changed her to being Asian, which it doesn't really matter. All they're using is the name, because none of these characters particularly look or act like the characters they're supposed to represent. We've got a version of Sandman here. They still use the name Flint Marko. I believe they use Tombstone, although again they never call him that. But I think his name was the character's name is Lonnie Lincoln. I think that's the character's real name, and they do reference him as that. So again, they're trying to sort of use Marvel's Spider-Man characters, but in a different way. It's I guess it's okay because it kind of works. I mean, you could have called them something else and just been like, all right, that's this version of Sandman. You don't need to call them Flint Marko. You know what I mean? They kind of could have just done that and went with it, and it would have been fine. I didn't really need them, to do that. They got Robbie Robertson, which I was kind of originally thinking, is this supposed to be like Robbie Robertson Sr., or was this Robbie Robertson when he was a young reporter? But then again, that still probably wouldn't line up, because let's say they go with the original timeline of Spider-Man in the 60s. Robbie's probably, I guess he would be about that age. I don't know. I mean, it's what I mean. It's kind of confusing if you overthink it. I prefer to think of it as, at least what I think it's supposed to be, is a Elseworlds universe where, this Robbie Robertson and this Flint Marko or whatever are the prime characters. They're not ancestors to a modern Sandman or Spider-Man or whatever. So the beginning of the show, basically, it doesn't really feature the spider very much. And I didn't mind that. Honestly, I think that was the best part of the show, because when you are advertised a Spider-Man noir show, you kind of figure, well, Spider-Man's going to figure prominently. He doesn't really. He really doesn't have anything to do with the first 3 or 4 episodes. And what we do get, though, is we get Nicolas Cage doing sort of a Humphrey Bogart slash Edward G. Robinson type character. He kind of has that kind of flair to him. He has sort of his girl Friday, Janet, which is like his secretary, which is again another trope from those days. And basically, I realized that a lot of the tropes that are in the show are ones that I've gladly used in my Bullets Bourbon stories. I mean, not the wisecracking secretary, but I've used, the less than honorable mayor, the sassy showgirl, the, you know, hired muscle, the, ambitious, flamboyant reporter. He's sort of a clothes horse. I've really loved all those tropes from the 30s, and I've kind of used them myself in my own books. So when I seen them showing up here and how they played out here, I was really happy. I really enjoyed it. Now, the villain of the piece is Silvermane, which again, this is a villain that probably would never get used again. Brendan Gleeson, I believe, if I can look at the copy here. Yeah, that's the name of him. He's a familiar actor. I've seen him before in different things. I couldn't tell you right now off the top of my head, but he makes for a great villain of the story. And Silvermane, again, a character, he's like an arthritic old gangster boss from the Spider-Man comics. I think particularly the early 70s, sort of set up as a rival to Kingpin, I think. And again, it was a great choice of villain for this type of story. And he played it very well. And a lot of the dialogue was something that I really enjoyed. You get the rat-a-tat dialogue, like, I can't remember off the top of my head, but like, for instance, I think Riley is talking to Kat, and he's like, I don't like surprises. And she's like, well, I'll remember that for your birthday. And it's like that great 30s dialogue that, is delivered in such a deadpan style that, and I mean, I've tried to write that in a lot of my books, and sometimes, just on the printed page, you can't get that effect, but you really get it in this show. And they try to, give you that kind of 30s detective style. And so I really enjoyed that. And so then when they came to the spider, now again, I'm not really going deep into the storyline, but the storyline has it that Ben gave up being the spider when his, I think his fiance died, because he was out celebrating. And by the time he tried to save her, because I guess someone, I'm not sure, someone revenge killed her by trapping her in a sinking car or something. And he blames himself, and he doesn't want to put on the costume again. And he hasn't for like 5 years. And this case brings him back to being the spider. And as the spider, it's a lot of fun. He's different from the Peter Parker spider. He's not quite as athletic. We don't see him sort of jumping around and hanging around upside down and stuff very much. It's mostly just him doing like faster than human movements and sort of abnormal, jumping and stuff like that. So it's not overly CGI laden, I wouldn't say. There's like 2 or 3 episodes where they deal with him maybe being the focus, the action of him being the focus. But as it turns out, these other people with powers, I don't know if they call them anything other than that, show up, such as the Sandman, such as Megawatt, which, before I go any further, I have to say, Megawatt was the most hammy performance I've ever seen. And that's saying something. There was Metallo on Superboy, and I always thought that was probably the hammiest performance you were ever going to see. I remember Madam Hydra, I think, from the Nick Fury movie with David Hasselhoff. One of the hammiest performances I've ever seen. But this guy that played Megawatt, honestly, had to be the most hammiest. And again, they probably asked him to do this. I mean, it's not like, this guy just took over the show and decided, hey, I'm going to ham it up and chew every scene until it was in tatters. But he does. And, it's good to a point. I think at a certain point, I was like, all right, dial it back, dude. You're not Jim Carrey. You know what I mean? Not every bit of this is, screen worthy. You can dial it back a little bit. But again, I'm not against the colorful and the ham-fisted, but there is at some point a line that can be crossed, and I think that maybe maybe they should have overthought a little bit of what he was doing. And again, of course, Tombstone, and it all ties into a experimentation that was going on during World War One, and Ben goes back to that where they were all experimented on. And this is the part where they kind of lost me. I'm going to say that this was, it gets a passing review from me. It gets a passing grade, but I don't like body horror. And this is kind of what they started getting into, where, there's a guy that's half spider, half human. And it's like schlock horror type stuff. And, there's a sort of mad scientist woman who's keeping the bodies of these guys still in stasis or whatever, that they're dead, but they're being experimented on. And it's like, that kind of had it grind to a halt for me. And then Nicolas Cage starts doing his Nicolas Cage things. Like, if you ever seen, like, for instance, if you saw Ghost Rider 2, it's basically like that on acid. You know what I mean? He's doing these weird, what I could best describe as like spider pose calisthenics. I don't really know how else to describe it, but he does like these herky-jerky motions, and then he like spends 2 episodes drunk. And I feel like they kind of dropped the ball at that point. And I was like, we could have honestly, I mean, because like I said, a lot of people feel like 8 episodes is not enough of a show. I feel like they kind of wasted 3 episodes of this show, and they could have kind of combined the idea of maybe 2 or 3 of those episodes into one. And you got rid of some of that stuff, because some of that stuff was just, was not to my taste. Let's put it that way. Another interesting thing, we've seen Andrew Robinson as a part here. I recognize him immediately as an older fella. What was that? I don't know. And it's pretty interesting to see him still getting these kind of roles. The first thing I remember from him was he was in Dirty Harry, I think, is the villain. But I remember seeing him play the villain against another Marvel hero back in the 70s, which was the Incredible Hulk, when he tries to perform some kind of brain experimentation on Dr. David Banner. And of course, the Hulk has to step in. So his career's come full circle, I guess. Very interesting there. The last episode kind of ties everything up. It's a little bit messy. It's a little bit unwieldy. We have Robbie. Well, spoilers, of course, now. Robbie, who was a fun character. I enjoyed him. He's sort of disguising himself as the spider, and he's got the antidotes for these villains. And it's kind of predictable. You kind of know what's going to happen. I mean, I don't mind that so much. But, and then sort of they leave Kat to take care of Silvermane because, she was put upon all those years being under his thumb. And so, like, she's the one to do him in. Kind of fell flat to me. I mean, she never sort of came across as being that capable, honestly. And she's the one to kill him. I don't know. That kind of fell flat. So again, they didn't really, I don't want to say they didn't stick the landing. I found it interesting as well. The way they end it between Kat and Ben, I've just found it laugh out loud funny. I don't know if that's what they were going for, and I still wonder to this day, is that exactly what they were going for? Their last interaction. Um, let's put it this way, it's less than romantic, and I wasn't expecting him to wind up with Kat, but I didn't really expect them to leave on such terms. But again, the case is closed, and sort of he has to soldier on. And people, I suppose, if people want to say, is this woke, because that seems to be the main question everybody asks about everything. I wouldn't say it's woke, but they do little things like that where Kat ends up taking out Silvermane, and I think, what's her name, Janet, ends up being a partner of Ben in the detective agency. um they have a very racially diverse cast, if you want to signal that out. I mean, like, you know Kat Hardy is Asian, and Robbie Robertson, obviously, they have the reporter is black. Janet is Latino, I think. So I mean, there's like a lot of diversity that was probably demanded by the studio or something, seeing as how this is Amazon Prime. Um, I wouldn't call it woke though, story wise. It seems pretty clear cut. I mean, you get like maybe one or two instances of them acting like a black man is being persecuted, sort of, for you know not legitimate reasons. I mean, that kind of did go on in history. I mean, I don't really think that counts as woke, that they mention that like once or twice. So I mean, if you want to call it woke, I mean, it's maybe only woke in so much as that I feel like they were checking boxes to make sure that there was a diverse cast. But I mean, apart from that, I mean, not really. I mean, I think if they were doing this show like pre woke era, that the girl that played Ben's fiance or whatever that died, the pretty blonde, she probably would have played the Kat Hardy part. But it's like, we have to delegate, uh, a biracial cast across the line, and so that's the reason why. But again, I mean, if they're not the actual Felicia Hardy, and they're not the actual Flint Marco, I mean, I don't really care what they look like. This is just sort of using the name as I don't know, a placeholder, because this is in the Spider-Man universe. But yeah, to wrap this up, I'm gonna give Spider-Noir, I'm gonna give it a B. Maybe 3.5 stars out of 5. Again, ironically, once the spider showed up, I felt like the show turned into something else. And I would honestly have given, if you cut out, like I said, 2 or 3 episodes and try to sort of rework them, I probably would have gave this an 8 out of 10. I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10 on that. I would definitely be there for a second season. I would like to see a second season. I think they've got a pretty good thing going here. I mean, again, you like 30 style, Dick Tracy meets King Kong meets, whatever else would be a good period piece for around there. That setting, it's a lot of fun, and I like the look of the character. Obviously, I mean, like I said, it's basically Spider-Man dressed as Bullets Bourbon. And Nicolas Cage, he's savvy with something like this. He knows how to get the best out of it that you can get out of a scenario like this, of a concept like this, and he did very well. Yeah, so I would give it a passing grade. And let me know what you think in the comments below on Spider-Noir. Until next we meet, this is Johnny Torch reminding you once again, keep the flame burning brightly, and I'll be with you again real soon.